I'm Frank from WerkMaster. I'm happy that you've invested in our equipment and our technology. And I'm here today to help walk you through your job here, your first job. Before we begin, what attracted you to WerkMaster?
Well, I found you guys online. I really liked your products. Your equipment seems easy to use, and so I thought I'd give it a shot.
Well, before we begin, we're just going to cover off a few basics. We'll have a quick walkthrough of the floor and just kind of see what we have, what kind of conditions we have, what we need to overcome, and we can start from there. Prior to starting any job, and the homeowner or contractor alike, what you want to do is you want to walk your floor and you want to identify what exactly am I doing, what are the conditions that potentially are challenges, how am I going to overcome these challenges. You don't want to just start grinding the floor, because if you do that, when you encounter an issue, it becomes a big issue. So if you just kind of look at your floor and, let's just review what you have here. So right off the bat here, you've got an epoxy coating. So this is a lot different than paint. Epoxy is a very high solids product, and it can be a little bit challenging to get off. So we're going to treat this area a little bit differently than we would say treat your clean concrete. There's also a few cracks that we want to think about. We're not necessarily going to do anything right away with them, but we will repair those cracks so they do blend into the aesthetic of your floor. Now, what look are you going for? Like, have you seen some magazine pictures, or what are you trying to, you're trying to transform the slab. So what are you trying to get out of the slab?
Yeah, that's kind of want to see as it comes up through the process. I'm thinking I kind of want a medium shine to a high shine, somewhere in that range, but we'll see when we get there.
So if it was like a paint finish, you're looking for like a semi-gloss finish, basically.
Yeah, I guess that's
yeah.
Right.
And that might, that's a conversation I like to have with our customers. I recommend contractors have that same conversation with their customers, obviously, right? So, this is a process. So you want to set the expectations and you want to let the customer know what you're going to deliver in advance to you doing that work. You've probably heard a lot of mention talking about the hardness of concrete. Concrete has two different types of hardnesses, basically. It has a compressive strength hardness, and we all know that concrete is hard, but it also has an abrasion strength. And the abrasion strength is an important factor to know, because that's going to help determine what type of tooling you use. So the harder the abrasion, the softer the tool. We know that it's the diamonds that are cutting, but the diamonds are suspended in metal. And we want, on a hard floor, we want a soft metal, and that metal is going to wear away and leave those diamonds cutting. On a soft floor, so had this been a rained out floor, if this was a really soft floor, we would actually use a hard bond. And the hard bond, that's designed to sort of stay intact. Anything is going to cut that floor, so we want to preserve the tooling life. So this is a little tool that we use. It's called the MOHS hardness tester, and this actually helps us determine the abrasion strength of the floor. And inside are a series of picks. They range from 9 all the way down to 2. So a 9 pick will actually scratch a diamond, and a 2 pick is actually made out of plastic. So you have a range of tools, basically. So what you want to do is start with your highest pick, and just holding it lightly. You want the pick to do the work. You just want to basically put your palm down and just scratch the floor. And as you can see, you can hear it scratching, but you can also see that it's leaving a line in your floor. So based on that, the fact that it's doing that, we know that that this floor is softer than a 9. So what we do is that when we go down to an 8, and then we just start doing the same test again. And again, you can hear it and you can see it. Good. So when you're doing that test there, you're doing a good job, but try and keep your palm on the ground there, and that way that allows the pick to do the cutting. You're not weighting it down with your hand. As you can tell, you can hear it cutting, so you know that metal pick is cutting through that floor. If you're going to be doing a lot of this, just make sure you keep that tip nice and sharp so you get an accurate result as well. So, all right, well, let's start with our, let's go down to our 6 pick and just see what that's doing. So what are you seeing there?
Still leaving a scratch. I can still hear it cutting.
You can still hear it cutting there. Yep. So let's drop it down to the next one there. Let's go down to our 5. So Carson, what are you seeing there?
It seems like it's leaving a shallower scratch.
Yeah, so I'd say that we're getting pretty close to the hardness of the floor. So when this stops scratching or leaving a mark, that means that that is the level of hardness of your floor. So based on that, we have a 5. So I'd say this floor is between a 5 and a 6. Okay. So that's what is considered a medium floor. So that tool, if you look at our tooling guide, that tool would use our medium bond tool, which is our white tool. Let's talk a little bit about the machine here. We're going to talk about the bottom of the machine, and then we're going to talk about the top of the machine. But so yeah, basically all of our machines use multi-heads to cut the floor. The outside spins clockwise, and the center plates spin counterclockwise. So that gives you a counter rotation. So it's kind of good to know that what's going on under your machine. So basically, what we have here, we call this a plug-and-go plate. So this is where our tools magnetically attach to. So for instance, one of the tools just clips in like so. So no tools are required to take these tools on and off. They're just all held in by magnets. On the back of our plug-and-go plate, we have a compression foam. This foam here is small in diameter and it's soft. So what this foam here does is it allows you, when it's on a floor, it allows you to contour to the floor. So if you're polishing or you're working on an uneven surface, this is the foam that you want to use. And if you want more information about that, just refer back to the instruction manual, the owner's manual that comes with the machine. So if you had a floor that had, say, a really thick coating on it, or you wanted to really flatten the floor, you would use a larger foam. And this foam is actually not as squishy as the first one, and this is called a hard compression foam, and it's bigger. This floor here will not follow the contour, but will flatten the floor. So that's when you want to use that. These are called shear pins. In the event that you should hit something in the floor, one of these will shear off, and that will prevent your belt from breaking. So it's a normal part that these pins shear off. You want to avoid it as much as possible, but just know that if this does shear off, in your kit comes a replacement. And we have a video online and also instructions on how to replace this. It's pretty straightforward, but you know, it's a good video to watch. This plate here is called a pad driver, and that basically is the drive dog. So that drives this plate here. These are called grommets, and this is what your shear pins slide into. The grommets are made out of a rubbery silicone type material, and they allow you some contouring and flex as well. Should you break a shear pin, always inspect these grommets and just make sure that they're not damaged. Because if they're damaged, when you replace your shear pin, you're going to put it back into a damaged grommet. You know, that could give you some issues there. Before we start cutting, let's adjust the dust skirt. We've got the machine tipped back, so that's probably the easiest way to, at the easiest time to adjust the skirt. So basically, you want the bottom of the skirt to just be about 1/4 inch off the floor. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to peel this back, pull it back, and then we'll put our urethane dust skirt back, and see just about 1/4 inch. When we drop the machine, it's going to compress a little bit, so it might give us a little less than 1/4 inch. We can readjust, but we want to keep it pretty close to the floor. We want to contain as much dust in this area as possible. We don't want that dust to escape into the environment, and we're going to breathe it in. It's going to get on stuff. So now that we've got that figured out, the first thing we're going to tackle is the epoxy paint here. And it's a very thin coating. The machine does come with a tooling guide that identifies what type of tooling you need to use for what type of surface. So under the epoxy and paint, our tooling guide is telling us that we need our teardrop and shark combo. So that's how we've got this machine configured. So Carson, we've kind of covered off the bottom. Now we're just going to sort of cover off the top of the machine. Basically, this is your handle assembly, and in your handle assembly, you have your speed control. So this is how you would control the pad speed of the machine. Basically, if you want to grind faster, you turn the speed up, and if you want to slow down, you turn it down. You've got that. This here is your start button, and you have to hold in the lever as well to start the machine. So basically what you do is actually you hold in the lever, press the start button. We don't want to grind with the machine in an upright position. We can adjust the handle by just taking out that pin, finding a position that's comfortable for us, and putting the pin back in. We're ready to power up the machine. So we've hooked up our power to your dryer, I believe. And basically all you do is that you plug it in, like so. Give it a little bit of a twist, that locks it in place. Now your machine is started up, and I'm just going to review the process. I'm just going to talk about the panel for a sec here. So the nice thing about our equipment is you don't have to worry about any of these buttons. These buttons are all now controlled by the handle. So how do we know that? If we look at the top corner of the screen, it says REM. That stands for remote. That means that we've taken away the programming and it's in the handles. Should it not say remote, you'd have to go back to your manual and put it back into remote. You would lose that functionality in your handle. This number here, 825, that is the pad speed. So as soon as you turn on the power, that's how fast your pads are going to turn. So in order to turn that number up or down, you basically go back up to your handle and you adjust that dial. The indicator that says stopped, that means your machine is stopped. It's not in motion. So should you be in a loud environment and not be able to see the machine actually engaged, the stopped would indicate that the machine is stopped. This button here, it says 0%. When the machine is stopped, it should read 0%. This indicator will go up depending on the load that you put on the machine. So if you were grinding through some very heavy glue, you might notice that this 0% turns into 90 or 95%. That means that you're using a lot of effort from the machine. We need to contain the dust. We're going to be grinding, so we need a way to get rid of that dust. And for that, we use a good quality vacuum. There's our dust extraction port. So all we do is that we get our vacuum hose here, and we just plug it in. And then what you want to do is that you want to take this cord here, your dust cord, and your power cord, and we just like to kind of put them together, wrap them up, like so. And that way they're out of the way. You're able to kind of see what's in front of you, and you know, they're not going to interfere in the process. So we've got everything hooked up. We've got our power, our dust extraction. You understand how this is all working. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take off the epoxy coating first. So we've got our proper tooling set up as per our tooling guide. What we want to do is that we want to start at sort of the middle speed here. So this machine goes up to about 1100. So we want to start at around 500, anywhere between like 500 to 600. You're always better to start slow and move up as opposed to starting at your full speed and then having to move down. The key is really to avoid any damage, unnecessary damage to the floor. Potentially starting the machine at a very high speed, you could incur a lot of scratches. So yeah, if we start around, let's just start at about 550, and we would look at that dial. It's about 550, and then we could confirm that with our actual LCD readout there. You're going to turn the machine on. Then you want to push it down and pull towards you. And then just move it forward. Not to say that you have to put downward pressure on the machine the entire time, but you just need to overcome, this is a soft start motor, so you just need to overcome that. We do not want to start the machine and just stop the machine on, like we want to keep the machine in motion at all times. If you do not keep the machine in motion at all times, the machine will want to dig into the floor and it could leave you 6 very heavy scratches that, although the machine is capable of taking them out, we want to avoid putting them in the first place. So we want to keep our actions fluid. We're going to run it all the way to the wall and then we're going to overlap by 1 plate and then come back on it, and I'll show you that technique. We've done our first cut, pretty straightforward. A few things to remember: keep that machine in motion. Do not stall that machine. So we don't want to see 6 rings in the floor. We want to keep that machine always moving. So if you recall, we scratched the floor initially at about a 5 or 6. Now that we've ground that cap off, we can see this floor has got a lot of aggregate fines in it. So that would indicate that this floor is quite hard. So what I like to do is, after my first cut, is I like to validate what my scratch test was. So what we'll do here, we'll start here with a 9 pick, and let's just re-scratch the floor. So we're going to use the same technique. We can hear it scratching, but we can't see it scratching. So what's happened is that this floor, by removing that soft cap, has actually revealed a very hard surface. So if we take the 8 here, it's no longer leaving a mark. You can hear it, but it's not leaving a mark. So this is something that happens occasionally, and it's giving us some new insight into this floor and what our challenges are going to be. We know that a hard floor is a little harder to braid, so we're going to have to work at this floor a little bit longer. So it's good to know that, and just adjust accordingly. Just a few things here. Don't worry about getting all the paint off in one shot. We're gonna run a north-south and east-west pass, and usually where the paint's in a little cavity or a low spot, we call it, usually the second pass gets it out. So you can see here you've got a little bit of aggregate, so that means that you had a high spot. You've actually taken this part of the floor down, and you can see over here that you have a little bit of aggregate. That means that you've taken that part down, but in the middle is a little bowl, and that's why you have the paint in there still. So running the machine in another direction, or even at a crosshatch or multiple directions, will eventually get down into that low spot. Once you get that out, and once the whole floor is even, then you can go up to your next grit. So we've started at the 16 grit tool, and we're going to jump up after that into the 30-40 grit tool. So we've got all of our epoxy coating off, but as you can see, normally the machine would get right up to the edge, but the drywall is actually proud of this perimeter wall here. So what we're gonna have to do, we're gonna readjust our skirt on the machine, and we're actually gonna get even closer than 1/8 of an inch to the wall. We're actually probably gonna be able to get right up to the wall there with this skirt adjustment. So it's a pretty easy adjustment. What you do is that we just take this off, like so. And what we're going to do, we're going to grind on this side of the machine. We're going to reposition the skirt. So if you grab your end, like so, and we're going to reposition the skirt so we've got the corner of the machine actually exposed right to the wall. So we'll go like this. And we're going to let that tool stay quite proud of the dust skirt. So we're barely going to come into contact with that tool. Just about there. And if you pull on your side, there we go. Bring that skirt over. Now what that does there is creates a condition where the tool is actually going to come in contact with the wall itself. And then we just put this back on, and you can see this is very thin. This is almost as thin as a piece of paper. So we just cover that back up to get our dust control. And now we've set the machine up as sort of an ultimate edger. So we don't need a secondary machine. We should be able to get all of it with this. We've set up the machine at the angle that we want to run along the wall. We don't want to run the machine parallel to the wall. We want to run it at a slight angle there, so we really get this corner into the wall there, and we get all that paint off. Here we are on day 2, and we had a few challenges on our first day, and one of the main challenges was we scratched the floor and it scratched at a 5 or a 6. We initially started cutting with that tool, but as we got into the concrete a little bit, we noticed that the concrete got very hard. So the white tool, the medium bond tool, works in that range, 5, 6.5. So when we re-scratched the floor, we noticed that it scratched at about an 8, 9. So that represents a floor that's almost as hard as a diamond. So that is going to be a very difficult floor to cut. And so that's why we moved into our geological grade diamond, our gold tools, which use a very soft bond and a geological grade diamond, a diamond that's almost as hard as a real diamond. And with that, we were able to then overcome the abrasion strength, the hardness of the floor, and cut through that floor. And that's why we have these really nice results today. You know, sometimes using water and modifying your motion does help, but what's really key is using the right diamond on the right floor there. So that's what we did, and now we've got these great results. We took advantage of yesterday as well, and we patched the floor out, and now we're ready to kind of remove the excess and carry on through our process. Basically, when you're grinding, what you want to do is, here's our crack here, and you want to remove 100% of the material that's on either side of that crack. So you just want to leave the crack filled in. If you don't take off that material, well, you're going to see that patch material in your floor when it's finished, so not the desired result that we want here. So now we're at our 70-80 stage, and believe it or not, we're almost 3/4 of the way through the job. All the hard work's been done. Now the 70-80s, their job is to pull the scratches out of the 30-40s. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the floor, that we're happy with the floor now. You know, if if there's a low spot or there's some patch that hasn't come off the floor or there's something that we're not happy with, we use the coarser grits to take that off. But this tool here is just kind of refining our floor and honing it. So if you have a deficiency in their floor, address it before you move on to the 70/80s. We've gone ahead and changed out the metal plates, and we've got our Velcro back plates. And then this is called our 100 grit achromic. So basically this is gonna further hone the floor, and it's gonna pull the last of the 70 grit scratches. The real key here when you're polishing concrete is that you wanna see a nice shiny surface void of scratches. Transition stage is a very important stage before we move on to the densification. The densification hardens the floor. If we've got scratches in a hard floor, they're going to be really hard to get out. And because we're going to go with a higher grit resin, like say a 200 grit resin isn't going to pull a 70 grit scratch or a 30 grit scratch. So this is your last chance to really get all the scratches out. One of the nice things as we move up in the range, we can actually go a little bit quicker. So we can walk the machine a little bit faster, making sure that it's still pulling the scratches out. And we could probably start at about 550 to 650 pad speed on this stage right here. When in doubt, just refer back to your tooling guide for recommended pad speeds, but just be aware that the lower the speed traditionally, the lower you go. And as you move up, you go a little bit quicker. And we've identified a couple of areas here that we really want to pay attention to. On very hard concrete, scratching is a very common thing. So we have a solution to fix it, but you want to make sure that you get all your scratches out. Here we've got scratches left behind by the 70/80 tools. So we're going to take our achromic tools, and the achromic is almost like a magic eraser. And it's going to pull all these scratches out. With a little bit of water mist and the achromic tools, we should be able to get that out. Because we don't want to have these scratches in, because for sure when we get to the 200 grit stage, they're going to show. So, you know, just hard floors, you got to spend a little bit more time. It's definitely worth it, but, you know, just identify these areas and, you know, just deal with them accordingly. So just to recap there, we had the 70 grit scratches. We had drawn that black circle with the X over top, a little bit of water mist, not a lot of water. You don't want to flood the floor. I always tell guys it's like it's raining, just the raindrops on the floor. You let that rain kind of soak in a little bit, and then you take your achromic tools, your 100 grit achromics. You could have also used a 50 grit achromic, but the 100s here did a good job. If the 100s weren't removing the scratch in sort of a timely fashion, then you could drop down to the 50s. But yeah, for sure, just run those 100s in that circular pattern, or that circular motion. Do not run the machine like a lawnmower when you're when you're trying to take out these scratches. And a little bit of patience, and they will come out 100% with the 100 grit achromics. The floor is looking great. We're done with the 100 grit achromics, and now we're ready to densify the floor. So what we're going to use is our Ultra Densifill. This is actually a 2-in-1 product. It can be used as a regular lithium silicate densifier, and that's what we're going to do here today. But if you're doing, say, like your interior or a higher end home, you could actually put this down, work it in as a slurry paste to fill any type of micro pitting. So it does have two purposes, but our purpose today, we're just going to get this floor hard. The purpose of hardening the floor is so that we get a good polish. The harder the floor, the shinier it's going to get. It also prevents any type of dusting. So we don't want to have any issues with dusting, and the lithium silicate densifier is going to help out with that tremendously. We'll just spray it down and we'll work it into the floor. The floor should stay wet for about 15-20 minutes. If you find it's drying up on you, just reapply in that area so that chemical reaction keeps occurring. We decided it would be a good idea to mock up a little sample to sort of set your expectations to what level of floor finish you want. What we recommend to contractors is that they actually, before they really get started, grinding the floor, is that they actually make a mock-up on that floor. There's a few reasons to make a mock-up. One of the main reasons is it lets the contractor understand the floor and kind of work through a system. He might find a variable there that he has to compensate for, or, in our case here, the floor scratched at a 5 and it was an 8. So, always mock up a sample before you go ahead and do the big job there, because it's a lot easier to dial in your sample rather than having to dial in your floor with every single step along the way. So what we've done here is I just wanted to show you, because you weren't sure what sheen level, and sometimes saying 400 or 800 grit doesn't really mean anything. You have to actually see it. So it turns out that you're happy with a 1500 grit. So we're going to start with our 200s, and we'll go into our 400s, 800s, 1500s, and that will complete this polish. We're going to take advantage of the fact that we're in a garage, and we're going to give your floor a good wash. For best results, now that we're finished the 200s, you want to really wash in between stages. You're always going to get a little bit of fine dust in the floor, and washing that floor is going to get all that fine dust out of the floor. Worst case scenario, it's not always possible to wash the floor. So you want to obviously give it a good vacuum and a sort of a dry mop then in between stages. This is for your best results. Always do that. A few little variables that we've had today. We're grinding in this garage. We've had some water coming in. We did wash the floor. It is quite cold. So the floor has become cold there. So we're going to hold off on our sealing. We want to be at least 10 degrees Celsius slab temperature before we seal the floor. So we'll come back and do that another day. But when you're in a cold condition, sometimes you can get a little bit of resin smear. And that's sort of those little, it's almost like a halo effect on the floor. So what we've done is that we've taken off the 800 grit resins, and now we're just going to give the floor a buff with a pink pad. So this pink pad doesn't have a grit, but it does give a little bit of a sheen, and it's kind of a buffing cleaning pad. And what that does is that it's going to take away that sort of smearing effect. It does come out, so there's no need to worry about it, but we just address it with the pink pads. When you're running the pink pads, you want to run them at a high speed. So usually I'd probably run the pink pads at about 1200 pad speed. You've done a really good job here. Just to recap here, we've run the pink pads, so we've got rid of all of our resin smear. The floor looks really good. So now we're ready to seal the floor. So we're using our WerkMaster UltraGuard sealer, and basically that's going to enhance your sheen, but it's also going to protect your floor from staining. So that's a pretty critical part of this process, is you want to kind of protect your investment now. So the UltraGuard is definitely the best choice to do that with. It goes on very similar like to the densifier. We're going to put it on with our pump up sprayer. We're going to put one coat, wait about 30 minutes, and then we're going to apply a second coat. It is a little bit cold here, so we're going to see what tomorrow brings, and if the slab does get a little warmer, we'll definitely be installing it. Once the appropriate level of polish has been achieved, thoroughly vacuum the floor, take a clean microfiber applicator and apply a small amount of UltraGuard to it, and a light coat on the floor. Use the microfiber applicator and pump sprayer to ensure a thin and even coat of UltraGuard has been applied. Repeat this stage 2 times. To give your polished concrete floor a maximum shine, use the edge as a high-speed burnisher and buff the floor. Allow the floor to dry for a minimum of 60 minutes prior to burnishing. Your concrete floor is now polished using the complete WerkMaster Polished Concrete System and is ready to turn over to your customer.